I'm excited. Oh, recording's in progress. Okay, I'll start again. Welcome everyone to our COBOL Programming Course 24 QI1 webinar. We got a great agenda on tap for today. We're going to be talking about the COBOL Programming Course, as well as some recent updates made on the Zoe project, and see how we can take advantage of those updates. So to kick us off, just wanted to reintroduce the Technical Steering Committee in case this is perhaps your first webinar that you've been joining. I'll go ahead and introduce myself first. I'm Michael Bauer. I'm an engineering manager at Broadcom, but I have a lot of experience in the Open Mainframe project, contributing to the COBOL programming course, contributing to Zoe, and different forms of advocacy through Open Mainframe Project Ambassador Program, as well as being an IBM champion. Siddharshana, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone. Super excited for us to, meet back with all of you, our amazing COBOL community, for our 1Q webinar, as Mike said. My name is Sudarshana Srinivasan. I work at IBM, and I lead our advocacy programs and also a lot of our community engagements. So super excited here today to be talking with Adam from Zoe. As everybody knows, COBOL and Zoe go hand in hand. And I think May said it best, right, Mike? When she posted, she said it's like peanut butter and jelly, COBOL and Zoe, and it actually rhymes.
That's right, absolutely. Hard to believe we haven't had too many of these webinars focused on Zoe in the past. So really looking forward to getting Adam's insight today, and lots of great work around the Zoe project, certainly. Just briefly, before moving on, a couple of our other TSC members who couldn't join today. Paul Newton, instrumental in supporting our back-end systems to facilitate the hands-on labs. Joe Winchester, another advocate and influencer in the Zoe space, also contributes to our course. There's a lot of CICS domain expertise. He's actually on another webinar talking about Zoe as we speak, so certainly involved in a lot of advocacy. And then Hartanto was a mentee turned mentor turned technical steering committee member, and you'll see him out on the Slack channel helping folks get started. And he's a significant contributor to both the COBOL programming course, and he's also made a couple contributions into the Zoe project as well. So without further ado, I want to welcome our guest speaker, Adam Wolfe. Adam is a Zoe squad lead and also an Open Mainframe project ambassador. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here. Like Mike said, I am the Zoe CLI squad lead, and I'm also I'm a Zoe Explorer squad co-lead with Billie Jean Simmons, who many of you might know. Hopefully I can shed some light on what the Zoe Explorer squad has been up to as we approach the release of V3.
Excellent. Great to hear. Also, multiple companies involved in the Zoe space, similar to here with the COBOL programming course with Broadcom and IBM, Billy being from IBM. So great to hear us all trying to work together to make this really a modern experience and open up new opportunities for folks onboarding onto not just COBOL, but the mainframe platform in general. So maybe to start us off with a little bit of an easy question here. How long have you been involved in the Zoe project?
Well, not very long. I started January of last year. Um, it was definitely a change from what I'm used to. My background was in embedded software engineering in the industrial and rail transit space. So never had worked with mainframes, but I did have experience with numerous IDEs, Eclipse. There are a lot of Eclipse-based IDEs used in embedded system development. And I was also a big fan of Visual Studio, mainly for C# development, but I was also familiar with VS Code, and so really working on Zoe as my first foray into the mainframe has been really a great experience, and um, just if you're going to get started in the mainframe, Zoe Explorer is really an easy way to dip your toes in.
That's excellent. Very insightful. I think that puts you in a prime position to help steer the direction of Zoe. Coming from a background that you're really onboarding onto the platform. You have a lot of low-level software engineering skills, but trying to make this really more accessible to the next generation, the next group of learners coming and trying to, become part of this broader mainframe team. Also, as an engineering manager, having hired a few folks recently, I've also found that to be the case. Really interested in driving the mainframe forward and helping support the platform. But by leveraging some of these tools, it really makes it more accessible to them and allows them to contribute more immediately, right? Still certainly onboard onto the green screen and gain those skills over time, but allows them to make immediate contributions and feel efficient in their roles. So I think that's great background. I think it helps drive forward really the goals of Zoe.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so just to get started with the goals of the COBOL programming course and talk about how Zoe is a key technology in what we're trying to do here. Our mission is threefold. First is to attract the next generation of learners, to add COBOL to their tech toolkit, also to add mainframe to their technical expertise. We're trying to do this by making the educational content really accessible to those who are new to COBOL in the mainframe, as well as some who are maybe have prior experience but trying to onboard again. And also by leveraging modern tooling, leveraging Visual Studio Code to complete hands-on labs. Hands-on labs is another area where our course offers differentiation among the other content out there, right? So as part of this course, you complete hands-on labs and get hands-on experience learning COBOL on mainframe systems. So that includes learning, JCL to compile and run COBOL programs and things of that nature. And then lastly, we're trying to create and engage an enthusiastic community of learners. And if you head out to our Slack channel, I think we've done a good job in cultivating that. And it's not really necessarily like myself or Sudarshana driving that. It's you. It's the community answering each other's questions. And there are a few folks who spend a lot of time in the community helping folks. So I give a shout out to Hartanto for answering folks' questions. I saw Adam in there the other day. Ross Cruikshank does a great job answering folks' questions on the Slack channel and helping people really have a good experience learning COBOL. And wanted to mention sort of the adoption of our course. So a lot of folks are familiar with the COBOL programming course in that it went viral back around the pandemic when it was initially launched. And the reason was COBOL was appearing in the media. There was this thought that, there was a skills shortage looming and that there was a lot of attention drawn to the need for COBOL developers. And given that, what do folks do? They go searching for how do I get COBOL skills, and they landed on our page. And this generated more than 100,000 views in the first month of the launch. And a lot of people got started, with taking the course or at least examining the course content. But I wanted to mention that this has sustained interest. So here's a recent view of our GitHub statistics over a recent 2-week period. And you'll see that, we're still getting about 6,000 views every 2 weeks. And that's generated from about 650 unique visitors. So still folks visiting the site, still getting weekly downloads of the course content. And to date, as far as folks registering for access to the mainframe to complete the hands-on labs, we've had over 22,000 IDs issued to folks interested in doing that. And as part of this, we've also generated interest in Zoe Explore, because a prerequisite to doing the labs is really to have the Zoe Explore VS Code extension installed. So certainly Zoe Explorer helps us make our content more accessible to the next generation of learners. But we also like to feel we have a little bit of help in driving Zoe adoption as well. And hopefully that's a good place for the Zoe teams to check out how folks are using their products, different areas they might be encountering difficulties, and help drive further improvement. So speaking of Zoe, let's get into that. Adam, you want to tell us some of the recent enhancements to Zoe?
Absolutely. So, I know we're all excited about V3. It's a big step for Zoe Explorer and the Zoe project more broadly. It gives us an opportunity to make more substantial changes than we would normally make for minor versions. And we're making excellent use of this opportunity structurally within Zoe Explorer, um, in terms of the underlying technology. Um, but for the average user, it might feel like more of an incremental step towards a more mature, robust, and fully featured Zoe Explorer. So with that as a bit of a preamble, I thought the best thing for me to do would be to first discuss some of the recent changes to V2 before we get to V3. And so while we've been preparing for V3, we've also been adding features and functionality to V2 that are very useful and I think are worth sharing with the COBOL programming course. And so I'll go over some of the highlights for V2 and V3, then dive into a quick demo. Screenshots are great, but I think seeing the Zoe Explorer in action is definitely a bit more interesting. So first here, we have some items for V2. Number one, we've added sorting and filtering to jobs and PDS members, which can make it easier to find the members and jobs that you're interested in seeing. Maybe you have a PDS with 100 COBOL source members, and you want to find the ones you most recently modified. Now you have that ability to sort them all by date modified, and a few other different criteria.
Yeah,
Uh,
this
Go
one's
ahead.
particularly exciting, and I think maybe some folks out in the community have experienced challenges with the jobs section of Zoe Explorer. So, one typical use case, especially in the course as folks are learning COBOL, is to run the JCL to compile the COBOL over and over again if they're having, syntactical challenges. And I think it's sometimes challenging to find, what's the most recent job that was submitted, because they all end up having, the same job name that you're submitting again and again. So here I see, by being able to sort by, date of execution and things like that, that can help you identify more easily the most recent JCL you're trying to work with and debug.
Definitely. The second one I have here is you can open a file or data set in a specific encoding or code page, and Zoe Explorer will automatically recognize the encodings tagged for USS files and open the files in the correct encoding. I'm not sure that this is the most relevant for the COBOL programming course, but I think you might run into this need in a professional role, and you'll be glad to know that Zoe Explorer will be able to handle non-standard code pages. And so next we've added two new UIs. The first being kind of a USS file attributes editor, which lets you change the encoding tag, change the owner of the file, the group, and you can also modify the file permissions. And the second here that we have is the history management UI, which you can use to edit your search history, dataset templates, favorites, and so on from a single window without having to modify files on your hard drive, try to track down the settings file. It can be difficult to find. So I found it really useful, this history management UI, when you've applied too many filters to the data sets or USS trees, and you end up having a list of maybe 10 different filters, and you have trouble finding the one you want. And the history management UI can let you clean up those filters, modify any dataset templates you might have created, and so on.
Yeah, I think those are both really great feature updates. I know prior to this enhancement, I used to sometimes modify the history directly in like the settings.json, but that was somewhat challenging to explain to folks. So having this, be intuitive to update those, I think is great. And then just a brief comment on the file attributes UI. I know for the testing course that we offer, we're like uploading COBOL check, a unit testing utility, onto USS, and we currently used SSH for some of that so that we could modify modify the read, write, execute permissions. So having this would allow us to perhaps update that portion of our content to leverage this new feature as well. So both, I see aspects of both that could be helpful for the COBOL programming course. Yeah.
Great. And finally, here we have made it so that you can add or remove a profile from all trees at once, which might sound insignificant, but it really helps to streamline the process of adding or removing profiles in Zoe Explorer. In the past, you would have to click the plus sign to add a profile to each of the 3 trees. Now, when a user clicks the plus sign, selects a profile, they have the option to just add that profile to every tree. Helps me out all the time. Maybe other people don't mess around with their team configs as much as I do, but I think it's definitely a useful enhancement. And so that's what I have for V2. I think it would make sense to go to the next slide. We'll talk about some aspects of V3, some highlights there, and then we'll dive into a demo, and you'll get to see some of these in action. So I know this might seem like a short list, but keep in mind that we have continued to add features to V2 while we've been working our way towards V3. And a lot of our work on V3 has been more focused on the, I guess, underlying technological improvements under the covers, things that support extenders, different ways of managing cached files. So it's not something the average user would really know if they saw it. It would just be Zoe Explorer working as you expect it to work. But that's not to say there are no new features. There are some things that will be available in V3 that are not in V2. Like a more streamlined process for comparing files and datasets. And I'll show you a demo, and it'll make more sense when I explain it. In the past, you could compare files and datasets, but it's a little bit of a, I don't know, herky-jerky process of opening multiple tabs and then going into the command palette. It'll be better in V3. Let's see, what else do we have here? The USS tree enhancements. Yeah, so for the USS tree, we've added the ability to issue USS commands and also drag and drop files and folders. The issuing USS commands is effectively sending a command via SSH and getting the output of that command back in VS Code. And I'll show you a little demo of that as well. It's pretty cool. Of course, the most significant change for users in V3 will probably be the removal of support for V1 profiles. So in V2, we introduced the team config as a new method for storing profile information. And if you have a zoe.config.json, then you have a team config. And the great thing about team config is that it stores all profile information in a single shareable file, so individual users don't have to set up profiles for all of their connections. Instead, they could get a team config set up by an administrator, a team lead, maybe another engineer on their team. And once they get that team config, they enter their credentials and they're good to go. And you don't have to be necessarily a Zoe CLI Explorer configuration expert to build a team config. You can use Zoe CLI to initialize a basic ZOSMF team config, or you could also go to the zoe.org documentation. And I think you'll find that we do have pretty comprehensive documentation on getting set up with a team config. And the format of team config is incredibly flexible, both in terms of the file structure and in the ability to make project level configs that apply only within a workspace or a directory. Or you can also make user configs to apply additional properties or override properties specified in a team config. Now in V2, we did support both the V1 old YAML profiles and the V2 team config format. But at this point, it's pretty clear, I think, that team config is the preferred format based on feedback we've received from users, customers, other organizations. And so by removing support for V1 profiles, we can also avoid splitting our focus between the two different profile formats and really just focus on making the team config experience as good as possible.
Yeah, I just add a comment there. I find the biggest win to that team config approach is really the ease of onboarding additional team members. For example, for our team, we interact with, say like possibly 8 to 10 different services because there's lots of CLI plugins on 4 to 5 different LPARs. So then you're talking 40 to 50 connections you would have to manage. But today the experience is hand them a zoe.config.json. They add it to their .zoe folder in their home directory, and then they can start running commands against all these services on all these different LPARs and not having to, have them do a CLI command to really create those profiles. And I think it also helps from a community perspective. Is like what we see a lot of issues coming in are around, typos. Like someone might mistype the IP address or something like that. By us having that in a configuration file and just instructing users to, put that in their .zoe folder underneath their home directory, I think it can alleviate some of those authentication concerns. After the demo, we'll talk about the impacts to the course. There is one section where we do use V1 profiles in the tolling setup that will likely need to be changed. If you're only accessing one service and that's all you're going to do, in that particular use case, V1 profiles were, I'd say, tolerable, right? You need to set up a host port combination to access a specific service like COSMF for data sets and files. That's okay. It wasn't that challenging. But when companies begin leveraging this and interacting with all these different services on these different LPARs, we really needed a way to share that information easily amongst users. And I really think Team Config has done a nice job in helping with that.
And if I could add, right, Mike and Adam, I think the issuing USS commands and drag and drop of files and folders, I think that's exciting, right, with V3. And Mike, keep me honest here, because this was something last summer, our summer mentee Ashish was working on as part of, integrating COBOL check into our COBOL programming course. And he had to issue several commands to bring files out of and into the mainframe to be able to run COBOL check actually on the mainframe, which I think we did, he was able to do for the first time, which is running it on the mainframe itself. Wouldn't this really help with that too, Mike? That's
Yeah,
exciting.
absolutely. That's spot on. I think that was one of the main drivers between having to include, establishing an SSH connection directly in the course content. And that's how we overcame that. One challenge was the file permissions. The other thing was invoking the COBOL check utility remotely.
Exactly.
You had to use SSH in, but now we can have this, GUI driven. And I think if they're already in Zoe Explorer, I think it makes it a little bit more intuitive to just right click, issue USS command or what have you, and move forward.
Yeah, that is exciting. So something to look forward to as part of our upcoming summer mentorship. I won't give it away.
Okay, so at this point, it might be a good time for the demo.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right. Okay, bear with me one moment. All right, you should be seeing VS Code.
Yep.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so for V2, first we talked about sorting and filtering for jobs and PDS members. So let me list some PDSs from my demo system here. So first thing you do, of course, filter based on whatever PDSs you want to see. Let me select a PDS that has a good number of members. So I've got a bunch of COBOL source files. How do I know which one I most recently edited? Well, I right click, I select sort PDS members. And then since I want the latest to the oldest, I change the sort direction to descending, and then I select date modified. That I can see, maybe, if the font is not too small, that I did modify this particular one on the 18th, which was yesterday at 6:57. I have a couple that I also modified around 6 o'clock, 5:45-ish. Very handy. Similarly, for jobs, I don't want to list my jobs because it'll show the SMF IDs, but you can sort jobs based on date submitted, job name, return code, and you can also, in a future version, sort by date that a job completed. It's not in the current release yet, but it should be in the next release of Zoe V2. So that's really the whole gist of sorting. Now
Yeah, that's
filtering,
nice. I like
yeah,
how you put the timestamp right in line. That's a nice way to do that.
definitely. Uh, and let me just change this. So you can also filter PDSs on kind of a similar sort of criteria. Um, I don't know, maybe you'd want to find only the members owned by a particular user. I don't know if that's a common thing or not, but I have one in here under a different user ID, which is Adam2. And you can also change the sort to user ID if you want. Um, I'm surprised it didn't say it, but yeah. So you can filter and sort jobs and PDS members. So let's move on to encoding. So previously in Zoe Explorer, you would open USS files and datasets in a default code page or maybe a code page specified in your user profile. But now you have the option to right-click on a dataset and select Open with Encoding. And I've made this particular dataset using two different encodings. And we'll see what the secret message is here if I open it in 1137. And you'll see it's just hello world. But now we can go back to Epsidic and you can see that. And in USS, you can, of course, do something very similar. However, with USS, you also have the added nicety of automatically detecting the tags. So in this case, Zoe Explorer recognized that this was tagged as IBM 300, which is a Japanese code page. I can also open this and it has no encoding, so it just opens it in the default code page. So yeah, that's the encoding functionality. I'm not sure if it's too useful for the COBOL programming course, but I think it's something people have definitely been asking for a while. And let me see what was next. The USS file attributes UI. So that actually segues very nicely from the encoding. So to open the file attributes UI, you right-click on a file, click Edit Attributes. And then you'll see the encoding tag. You'll see the owner. You'll see the group that owns the file. And then you can also modify read, write, and execute permissions. I can say that's clearly not a file that's ever going to be executed and apply changes. And yeah, you'll find that the attributes have been saved. And that is that. And next we'll talk about the history management UI. So in Zoe Explorer, you might have entered a bunch of, well, you might have entered any number of filters. As you can see, I have a couple different filters here that I've entered. Let's say I only really want the one at the top, my high-level qualifier. I right-click on my profile, and then I go to Edit History, and let me hide that. And then I can see here, I am zoomed in, so the UI might be a little bit cramped, but I can see that I have search history, and it has the different filters that I've entered. So I don't really want these filters anymore because I can just go to my high-level qualifier really, and that's all I need. So I can delete those from my history. And then if I were to go apply another filter for my datasets tree, you can see that I only have the one, that's my user ID high-level qualifier. And you can do that for a bunch of different things, not just your filters. You can also clean up dataset templates that you might have created. You can remove some old favorites from here. You can look at your file history in terms of if you're trying to figure out what datasets did I actually work on recently. That's useful. You can see I have a bunch of different things here. And you can do similar things for USS and also for jobs. So that's the edit history or the history management UI. And
Just
sure.
Adam, just a follow-up question or comment for folks who aren't maybe aren't familiar. DS templates, that's what you use for saving, I'd say, your favorite allocation parameters for allocating new files, right? New
Yes.
MBS data sets, right? So then the experience here intended is if folks do take advantage of DS templates, instead of having to find a recent PDS to do an allocate like I believe that's how a number of folks create new data sets on the mainframe. They find one that's suitable and they do an allocate like. You could save ones that are well suited for your organization there, so you don't have to find it and you can just allocate it from that data set template. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Maybe I could just create a data set here. Let's see, w dot, I don't know, test, COBOL, sure. And you can see I do have already a template stored up here. That's custom template. But let's say I wanted to create a data set using some kind of parameters that are not the defaults. So let me say, I don't know, record length. I don't know, let's go 0. And then FB, let's change that to U. I can allocate a data set. It'll ask me, would you like to save these attributes as a template for future data set creation? I'd hit save. And then it gives me the option to enter a name for the dataset template. I'll just call it Adams template. Then that dataset template is saved. So whenever you go to create a new dataset, you can see from the list, you can click on this dataset. You can also see that it has record format U, record length 0, and then you could also modify whatever attributes you want and allocate the dataset. And so if you've created a lot of dataset templates, or maybe you want to clean up what templates you have, you can use the history management UI to remove some of those templates.
Very nice.
And so the last thing is adding or hiding a profile. I can just show you that very quickly here. Here I'm going to hide the demo profile, and so I right-clicked on my profile there, manage profile, and then I just click hide, and now I get the option to do you wish to apply this for all trees? Yes means apply to all trees, or no means apply to the current tree selected. I'm just going to apply to all trees, and you can see that the demo profile has been removed from all trees. Now, you can also do a similar thing in reverse. Here I'm adding the demo profile. If I wanted just the demo, or if I wanted the profile just to be in the datasets tree, I could hit no, and then you'll see there's just the demo here and not in the other trees. But you can also just add it to all trees like so. It's a small thing, but it does make a difference if you're like me and you are always swapping in different team configs. Maybe hopefully nobody else changes their team config as much as I do.
Well,
So
it's great that it adds it to all the different trees there, because one use case that's typical is folks will be working with data sets and they have some JCL they want to submit, and then the Zoe Explorer has that nice functionality that it pops up in the bottom right hand corner with the ID of the job that was submitted. And I think you have to have that profile already existing in the jobs tree to have that sort of integration connected up. That may have changed, but that was one use case we see a lot in the course.
yeah, I believe that is still the case.
Yeah, so then like now, instead of having the steps to onboard be, add your, I think it's learn COBOL profile, if I'm not mistaken, add your learn COBOL profile to each one of these. We can just add it to all, which is definitely handy.
Sure. All right, that's V2. I'll move into V3 and we should be through this pretty quickly. So just preface this with this is, beta pre-release software. I tested it and it should work, but just don't be surprised. So in terms of features we've introduced in V3, the first one I mentioned was improved file comparison workflow, I guess you'd call it. So previously you would open one data set in a tab, open another data set in a tab, and you would hit Control Shift P and select compare file with open or something like that. But now you have the option to right click on a data set or a PDS member. And I clicked select for compare. And then you have the ability to compare with selected. And that will open the kind of the diff tool view. You can see what lines have been modified and so on. Which is kind of a less clumsy approach than you might have to do to do the same thing in V2. The next one I want to show you is the ability to issue a USS command. So just FYI, here's what I have in my home directory here. Not much. I do have a small script. But so to issue a Unix command, you right click on your profile here, the USS profile, select issue Unix command. And the nice thing here is it does also store your history for issuing Unix commands, which is handy if you're doing something repetitive. In this case, let's just run the hello shell script. You can kind of guess what that's going to output, hello world. Similarly, you can do a cat on the hello shell script and get the script contents there. And you can string things together as you would for a normal Unix command. I've changed my directory. Now you're seeing the contents of the encoding test folder. So that's kind of the gist of it. It's not a persistent session. So if you issue a CD command, the next command you issue is not going to be into the directory you changed into the directory that you changed to. So keep that in mind. But I guess, are there any questions there before I move on?
Yeah, those are going to really be my only question there is if you wanted to create a persistent connection, if there would be any integration in the future into that right click menu. I suppose if not, you can just go to the terminal in your integrated terminal here and establish your own SSH connection. So it's probably not a big deal, but I was wondering, maybe that's something to consider in the future if VS Code allows it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think would be desirable. One of the nice things the Zoe Explorer for IntelliJ does um, is they have a persistent TSO session window that opens in like a console view or in their terminal um, in the IntelliJ IDE. It'd be nice if we could do something similar with VS Code, have a kind of a live SSH session of some kind. But yeah, it's we have no immediate plans for that, but it's definitely something I think we'll look at.
Sounds good.
Okay, and one other thing here would be the drag and drop functionality, which is really on the cutting edge. I have to install a separate build for this. So let me get back into USS here. And so the gist here is you're able to kind of grab a file and move it around into another directory. I can move test2 into other. I could move test2 back out of other. I could select multiple files here and move them into a different directory. That's kind of the gist of it. Still beta, but that is what it is.
Yeah, no, that's a nice feature as well.
Okay, and yeah, so I think that's everything I have to share demo wise.
You don't necessarily have to share it, but one question I would ask is, showing this pre-release version, is there a way our audience can get their hands on this and try it out and give feedback?
Absolutely. So I guess probably the easiest way to get a hold of a build of the pre-release version would be to go to um, the GitHub repository for Zoe Explorer, which I think is github.com/Zoe Explorer Zoe-Explorer-VS Code. It has been changed recently from its old name, but I would go there. Alternatively, you can go to the Open VSX um, extension registry and search for Zoe Explorer, and you can find pre-release builds in Open VSX as well. You can't get it in the VS Code marketplace, but I would go to the GitHub repository. I think that's the best option.
Okay, good deal. I'm going to try to find. All right, I'll go ahead and paste the link if anyone's interested. Go ahead and paste it. Right,
There's
so maybe me to it a little bit here. The link to the repo. Here's the link to the specific releases. And then it looks like this one that I'll paste next in particular is the most recent uh, next release, which is sort of your preview. So if you're interested in trying that out and giving feedback, feel encouraged to do so. Just one note is your V1 profiles will need to be converted to team config to use that. But yeah, that's great.
a couple questions, Mike, in
Okay.
the Q&A, if you want to take that.
Right. Yeah, so there are a couple that were answered, but just to maybe re-answer them live here for everyone. One was asked, will we continue to support conversion of V1 profiles? Yes, we'll support conversion, but not use of V1 profiles. So there will be the command to convert your existing V1 profiles to team config format. The other question, will the recordings be shared with us? Yes, the video will be posted on the Open Mainframe Project YouTube channel later this week. And typically there's also a LinkedIn announcement that goes out as well. You might see that there. And then can you show the DS template view? I think that must have come in just before Adam shared that DS template view. If there's any follow-up questions to that, just open another question in the Q&A. But I think we've handled those three.
Awesome.
let me go ahead and share my screen back. So now we want to talk about impact to the course and possible, opportunities for folks on the line to, engage with the COBOL programming course. So let me share my screen again here. So quickly, I'm not going to necessarily go into the details of each one of these courses, but if you're interested in the specific content, encourage you to go to our GitHub repo, the COBOL programming course on GitHub, and check out the PDFs. They're also available under releases, similar to the link I provided for the Zoe Explorer asset. But really, I want to focus on the possible opportunities to make improvements to the course as I go through these. So our course is split into 4 different books, 4 different sections. So we have Getting Started, which is tooling setup. We have Learning COBOL, Advanced Topics, and Testing. In Getting Started, for tooling setup with Zoe Explorer, we will need to make minor updates to recommend just going to team config. We also briefly covered how to set it up with V1 profiles, and that was mostly for the angle of, you're just trying it out and setting it up to work with one service. We didn't feel a need to move away from V1 profiles at the time for that particular piece. Walking through, just initial setup. So we would want to update that chapter with appropriate screenshots to show just team config and how to set that up. We also show a couple of different niceties of these tools, give you insights on how you can get more value out of them. And I think there's some opportunities there as well. The select for compare and compare with selected functionality, the drag and drop functionality, being able to do all those different sorting capabilities, such as last edited time, and things of that nature. I think it would be important to include some of that tooling in the getting started and tooling setup section. In the Learning COBOL book, which is likely our most popular book, we have a lot of hands-on labs, right? So there could be a review of those hands-on labs to see if we can provide better instruction on how to get more value out of some of these recent Zoe enhancements. One that came to mind was making sure, like, how we would instruct folks to add profiles to each one of those trees that Adam outlined. We could simplify that to just add this profile to all trees, and also giving advice on some of the labs where you're submitting multiple JCLs, or maybe you're experiencing difficulties with getting your JCL to complete successfully. You might want to sort those job names in that output by the time you submitted them or the time they finished, and we could include some of those recent feature updates as well in that area. Course number 3, I don't think there's too many challenges or changes to be made here. Really just advanced topics. It's an extension of Learning COBOL, and then also adds a couple different COBOL challenges. Although I was wondering here, some of these are a little bit more complex, these COBOL challenges. So maybe some of these things like select for compare, compare with selected, would be useful to run. I was also thinking, maybe we provide solutions to all these challenges already on the mainframe environment, and then you could compare your answer easily with the answer that was accepted, or something like that. Things to consider. But I don't think there's too many opportunities for changes in the advanced topic course. And then we have our testing course. I think there's a lot of opportunities to leverage some of these new features presented in the testing course. We have to upload files on the USS in order to enable COBOL check to run on the mainframe. And I think a lot of the functionality that Adam covered would be helpful in making that experience easier and more consumable. And then we didn't touch much on Zoe CLI. There is an intro in the tooling setup to use Zoe CLI in the course, and it talks about how you can use the Zoe CLI to interactively run JCL, and it talks about, I believe it talks about, there's also Kix plugin for Zoe CLI that allows you to do, in the CLI, it's called a refresh program command, but it's essentially a new copy on the system. We could expand upon this testing to leverage the CLI for automation. So we could automate the compilation, execution, and testing of a COBOL program. And then we're also interested eventually in moving more into the Kix space. We need some changes on the environment side to get there. But if that was in place, we could also use the CLI plus its Kix plugin and possibly even its DB2 plugin if we have a COBOL Kix DB2 application, to really drive some, maybe integration like testing there from a Jenkins pipeline. For now, we'll start with probably batch COBOL programs and go from there. Yeah, so if you haven't checked out the CLI, one note is if you get the team config and you have Zoe Explorer running, the CLI will leverage that same information to run. So you can just install it and try it out and get started today. The focus on really Zoe Explorer a lot is the interactive experience is much improved. But if you had repeated tasks that you want to automate, Zoe CLI would be a good way to go or a good thing to consider. And then that brings us to the upcoming summer, which is traditionally each year we have the Open Mainframe Project Mentorship Program, and the COBOL programming course has participated in recent years. And we've had a lot of returners to our program. They go from mentees to mentors, and like Hartanto, to possibly TSC members. Ashish was a great mentee last year, did a lot of the COBOL check work for us. And he's looking to possibly return as a mentor. And then also we would be, as TSC, helping along the way as well. A couple different angles we can take for this opportunity. One is have you help update the course and screenshots with the latest and greatest Zoe functionality and make sure we're up to date and leveraging the latest so we get the most value to our learners. And then the other aspect is around that Zoe CLI route in the testing chapter, get more hands-on labs involving automation. We talk about it towards the end of that testing chapter, but there's not really much hands-on learning as it comes to automation and Jenkins and Zoe CLI beyond the automation that's done with COBOL check. So that's another opportunity coming in the relatively near term. So if either of those interest you, I would just say reach out to us and apply through the OMP mentorship program.
Absolutely, yeah. Great opportunity to add COBOL to your tech toolkit if you're, a student out there looking for a summer internship mentorship opportunity. This program is just absolutely amazing. And I mean, COBOL is one of the opportunities available through the mentorship program, right? There are several other Open Mainframe projects that offer mentorship as well. So check it out and, apply. We would love to work with someone here on the COBOL course. I think this whole CI/CD and bringing in Jenkins to our course, Mike, is going to be, absolutely cutting edge, right? Showcasing how you could bring your COBOL programs to your, CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is exciting stuff. Thank you so much, Adam. I can't thank you enough for adding, the Zoe team for adding this drag and drop of files. When I saw that, I'm going, wow, this is something Ashish was working really hard on last year, because every time he had to run it, he would have to bring the files over into the mainframe. So it was like, upload every single time. So this drag and drop is going to be really, again, it makes that user experience so much nicer and easier, right? So
Absolutely. And then that just before we just before we close here, there was one more question. Will you be continuing these webinars? And yes, we plan to continue the webinars on a quarterly basis is what we've been doing for now. But with that, can you share the link where I can apply for the learning courses? Is that in regards to the COBOL programming course in general, just the PDF?
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
just
Siddharth
sharing
is
the
sharing
link to
it.
I'm sharing the link to our GitHub there.
Okay.
I think that's I think that's the question for how to access the course. So I shared a link to our GitHub repo, and you can download the PDF from there, or, and work you way through the chapters and follow along through the labs as well. Did we lose Mike there? Mike? Adam, are you there?
I'm here. I think Mike may have run out of battery.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, his did say low battery. Yep. Okay. No, but this was great. I hope we were able to answer all the questions. Wait, a couple more. Also for labs, yes. So all of that is in that one GitHub repo. When you go to our GitHub for for the COBOL programming course, you can download the PDF and all of the instructions on how to get access to the lab, into the environment, the mainframe, and joining the Slack channel so that you have that community of learners to support you. And of course, our labs and all the instructions, they're all part of that course. So do check it out. The GitHub repo is your place to get started. Anything else, Adam, that you would like to add from us, as we close out? Any words of wisdom to share with our learners and, Zoe fans?
It's a broad question. Yeah, no, I think Zoe is one of the most interesting projects I've worked on. I think the open source nature of it and the collaboration between major players in the mainframe software space makes it such an exciting piece of software, and I think it's really helpful for engineers new to the mainframe. And I think the COBOL programming course does a great job at applying Zoe Explorer towards expanding knowledge and use of COBOL. So I think it is a great match, and very happy to be here.
Peanut butter and jelly, May said it. Yeah. But that was always the intention, right? Even when we started this whole course, Adam, and it was that the focus needs to be in learning the programming language, learning COBOL. So Zoe, I think, was absolutely the right call to make, in the sense that the environment was made easy. So the focus was learning COBOL. And that's the journey we started on, and we want to continue to stay on, where, learning COBOL is made easy, right? So thank you so much to the Zoe team for everything you do. And as I said, the version 3 updates that are coming down the pike is really exciting. We will definitely leverage it in our course starting this summer. So we're open and looking for summer mentees, so come apply. Anything else, Mike, before you as you close it out?
No, I think you all said it best. I would echo those sentiments. Happy to be working with Zoe. Thanks for joining the call, Adam, and offering insights on what's new with Zoe, and then also the Zoe V3 release we're all excited for. And again, if anyone's interested in applying for the Open Mainframe Project Summer Mentorship, please do so. And really thankful to see a good turnout on this webinar. So thanks for joining, and we'll try to get those updates out to the Slack channels in the future on future webinars to drive awareness.
Great
Thanks
idea.
again, and have a good rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.